Okay. According to Zoom, it is live. So we should be good to go. If you could just check.
So
Yeah?
I see you on Facebook and just checking YouTube.
Perfect.
I don't see on YouTube yet, no.
Okay. It sometimes takes a little bit longer on YouTube.
Okay, wait,
So,
yeah.
yeah? Okay. Great. Saurabh, could you confirm for Avishkar?
Yes, you're live on Facebook.
Okay. Fun stuff. Perfect. I love it when things go smoothly. All right. Welcome everyone who's just coming in now. Again, we're just waiting a few minutes to finalize things and get things set up. So please sit back, get comfortable, and ready for our session starting in 4 minutes. Thank you. All right, I think we can get started now. So welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have you all here. And I'm sure there are going to be more people trickling in as we go by. My name is Akhil Jobanputra. I'm the founder and president of the Indian Classical Music Society of Vancouver, based here in British Columbia, Canada. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here. And I'd like to also welcome all of our panelists, whom I will be introducing shortly. Arunji, Aditya, and Deepika, thank you all for being here with us today, as well as my co-moderator for today's session, Saurabh from Avishkar Arts. We all welcome you, and we're looking forward to a very engaged and dynamic event today. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we gather here and ICMSV operates on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo communities. Residential schools operated in Canada until 1996, which is just 1 year before I was born. So it's quite recent, and it's something that we often think is forgotten long in the past. Their destructive impact is not only rooted in the past, but it is continually present and continues to affect Indigenous communities all over Canada. Just last week, it was brought to light that the remains of 215 children were found on the ground of the Kamloops Indian Residential School. Our heart goes out to the Secwepemc-speaking people, as well as other First Nation communities across Canada during this very tragic and devastating time. I heavily encourage everyone here, not only those in Canada, but those joining from elsewhere as well, to learn more about the history of residential schools and the devastating impact they have had here in Canada and continue to have. You can also donate to the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, which provides essential services and support to survivors of this atrocious system. And again, we acknowledge that we continue to operate colonially on their lands. We are very grateful to them for us to be here on this sacred land. So today's talk is going to be about exploring the film The Disciple, which I've been extremely excited about. I've been following it so, giddily throughout its journey. And I'm very happy it's come to Netflix because that's the only chance that I've gotten to see it. So if you haven't yet, I highly, highly encourage you to watch the film. But nonetheless, I'm sure you'll be able to take away a lot from today's discussion. We'll be talking about these musician actors and their experiences in the film, doing something that might be quite new for them, and also understanding the dynamics of their relationship as an actual musician of the Hindustani tradition, what it was like to play a role which is kind of their life, and what from that role is like their life and what isn't like their lives. So we're very excited to have all of our panelists here, and I'd like to introduce them now. Our first panelist for this evening is Dr. Pandit Arun Dravid, who is a veteran vocalist of the Jaipur Atroli Gharana. He's a disciple of Ustad Abdul Majid Khan Sahab and Vidushi Kishori Amonkar. And Arunji played the role of Pandit Vinayak Pradhan, the guru in the film, the guru of The Disciple. And I'm very lucky to be able to learn under him, and we had the wonderful opportunity of hosting him in Vancouver a few years ago for a concert and a workshop. So it's a pleasure, Arunji, to have you here again, although virtually, and we hope we get to have you again soon in person too. So welcome, and thank you for being here. Our next panelist is Deepika Bhide-Bhagwat, who has learned from multiple acclaimed gurus, including Pandit Vinayak Bua Kale, Pandit Madhukar Joshi, and Vidushi Dhondutai Kulkarni of the Jaipur Atroli Gharana as well. She has received numerous accolades and has performed extensively across India, and Deepika plays the role of an emerging vocalist, Sneha, in the film. And thank you, Deepika, for also agreeing to be here with us today. It's lovely to meet you and nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having us.
And our final panelist, Aditya Modak, stars as the lead of the film, Sharad, the disciple. And he himself, in real life, is a disciple of Dr. Ram Deshpande of the Gwalior Gharana. And he used to work in a multinational financial institution, but then he decided to give it up and pursue his passion for music full-time, which is kind of interesting if we contrast that to his character, Sharad, who kind of in a way goes the other way around. Although he doesn't end up working at a financial institution, he goes backwards from being a vocalist to doing something else. So that's very interesting. And Aditya was present at the Disciples premiere at the Venice International Film Festival, where they received the Golden Osella for Best Screenplay, as well as the International Critics Prize. So that's such an exciting moment. Congratulations to you, Aditya, and to you all, and to the rest of the film's cast and crew. And we're very happy to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Akhil. My pleasure.
So today's session, as we have mentioned, will include, a discussion. It'll begin with a discussion, which will be moderated by Saurabh and myself. And Saurabh is my co-moderator for this evening, and he is the founder of Avishkar Arts, which is an organization which does Marathi movie screenings and stage shows, and have been doing so for the past 5 years. So thanks, Saurabh, for being my partner in this and helping get things together and helping moderate today's session.
Thank you, Akhil.
So after the discussion with the panelists, it'll be followed by a Q&A session where you, the audience, will get a chance to field your questions to the panelists. So Saurabh and myself will skim through them and we will present your questions. If you'd like it to be addressed to someone specifically in the panel, please do indicate that. And please send all questions in the Q&A feature. Please try not to send them in the chat feature so that we can all monitor them in one place. And we will try to get through as many questions as we can, but as you all know, we do have a time limit with this event, so there's only so much we can get through. So please bear with us, and we will do our best to answer everything as much as we can. So I will now pass it off to Saurabh, who will get started with the program. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Akhil. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My first question is when you were approached by Chaitanya or the casting team for the film, what was your reaction on that? Probably Arunji can start.
It was a big surprise when they came to me, as I had 2 other careers going on in parallel, and I was not sure whether I wanted to indulge into something else. And I suggested to them, for the role they had in mind, 5 or 6 names of eminent musicians and who could fit into the role of Guruji. And I said, why don't you approach to any one of them? And the answer was, we already have been to them. And we therefore want to insist on you taking the role. And after a lot of persuasion, 2 months I kept saying, but they could not take no for an answer. So finally I succumbed to their desire, and there I was in the film.
But it was good. Like you say yes, and you did it. It was good for all of us.
Once having said yes, then you can't compromise with your performance, what you want to do for the film. Yes. Then I gave my whole soul for it. But that was the history.
Yes. How about you, Aditya?
Yeah, I keep saying that, when I got the first call from Yugandhar, the casting director, I was working in that multinational bank that you were talking about. And I really thought it was like a prank call. Like, we musician friends keep doing that, sometimes with each other. And when he said that we are looking for, because for me as a musician, the wildest thing for me would be like someone calling me for a playback singer gig, out of nowhere somewhere. I'll still be surprised. But someone calling me to audition for a lead protagonist of a feature film, I just couldn't believe that at that moment. And I said, okay, I would love to do that, and just forgot about it. And after a week, he called me back again to set up a meeting. And at that point, I really thought that, okay, this is something serious. And that's how the journey actually began. And later on, I still remember when I gave up my job, because this took another like 4-8 months after the meeting. And then I got a final call from Yugandhar saying, Chaitanya wants to meet you. And that was the main meeting which took place. And the whole journey started from there. So that was the main turning point, I would say.
Nice. And what about you, Deepika?
Yes, as Aditya said, I also thought that it is a prank call, and I actually ignored the calls for first 2 3 days, and I kept saying that I'm busy, I'm somewhere outstation and something like that. But and then I actually asked them whether they want me as an actor or a playback singer for the film, and I also wondered that why Chaitanya would want me to come for the audition, because any Marathi good actress would be happily be part of his film. But then I think Yugandhar and Shilpa, they explained the storyline and everything, and they said that please come for the audition, and Chaitanya also wishes to meet you and everything, and then the entire process started.
Wonderful. Generally for the any stage shows or anything, we do have the workshops. So did you have any workshops before that? Did you enjoy the process? How did it work?
Yeah, I think I will go first with this. Absolutely, because we come from a completely non-acting background, so we definitely needed these rehearsals, and that's how generally happens. Even with the actors when they are prepping up for a particular role for a film internationally. And Chaitanya was very kind because he took a lot of rehearsals for us and also did some workshops. Even me, Nana did together some of the workshops, and me and Deepika also did some of the workshops together, and those proved to be really helpful because he was mentoring us all throughout these workshops. He was guiding us what he exactly wants, what should be the tone, the pace of the entire scene and stuff like that, you know. So that really proved helpful when before getting all prepped up before we were on the sets to do the thing.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, definitely. I think Aditya has covered up all the points. But we also got a chance to went to Nana's place and learn a few bandishes from him as a part of the process, just to be, in that place of a disciple and the guru relationship to develop that bond and everything.
Right. It's the same like when the movie is made, it's completely more on the technical side. You do lot of retakes. It's completely different. So how did you cope up with that then? Uh, uh, yeah,
Saurabh, can you just repeat the question? Sorry, I lost you in between.
right. So you have performed on stage as a classical singer, but when you're doing a movie, the shooting takes completely different approach with a lot of takes, retakes, more on technical side with lights and sound. So how did you cope up with that? It must be completely different experience then.
Absolutely, yes. Because with respect to the stage fright, I'm sure both the other panelists also would be with me on this, that we don't have particularly the stage fright as we say, because we are very much used to singing in front of a large audience. But saying those lines in front of those audience and taking direction on a set of 100 200 people, that's a completely different ball game altogether. But like I always say, both Vivek and Chaitanya, they were very kind, because they gave us that time that we needed and also made sure that the whole set of these many people wasn't very intimidating enough for us to feel awkward at any point in time. And yeah, we were coping because we already had those instructions, and the way Chaitanya works is he gives the actors also a lot of time, and he also takes his own time to set the tone of that particular day and let everyone settle in into that ambience for that day. So I wouldn't say it was very tough to get accustomed to that. uh, of course, on the first couple of days we were also completely new to the entire background of what happens on the set and how things work, but as the days progressed, I think we also got used to it.
And we've got to learn a little bit more about your learning curve with that experience. But was there also a learning curve the other way around, maybe for the director Chaitanya or the rest of the crew, in order for them to acclimate themselves to weaving and capturing a story of a Hindustani musician?
I think I can take that.
Yeah, please.
There were, well, I think I would have to say that Chaitanya, as a director of the film, was very well prepared. He had researched generally the field of music quite nicely. But then he had certain limitations that he was never himself a singer or a vocalist. Secondly, the script that he wrote, particularly as it relates to the role of the disciple and the Guruji and the rest of the cast. I had from time to time made suggestions to Chaitanya as far as the language in the script was concerned, as to how people of that generation might put a certain phrase in different words rather than the phrase he might have used, and a few suggestions here and there as to the scene itself. But they were far and few. I think most of the script and the directing was his baby.
Yeah, it's nice to see though that there was this mutual line of communication, between you all and the director and the rest of the crew, and really making the film, what it has become. Arunji, I'd love to continue with you. So the film opens with your recital in Rag Jaunpuri, and we also see this rag appear again during Sharad's Talim, which is used as the opening of the trailer. Is there something that, is trying to be conveyed by specifically using Jaunpuri at the beginning for both the trailer as well as the performance? Is there a purpose behind choosing it?
Well, I believe the origin of the selection of Rag Jaunpuri has a little bit of history, which I might share with everybody. And that is the Chaitanya as a director, and then Vivek as a producer, plus the casting director, and last but not the least, our music designer, Anish Pradhan. They all once secretly came to a concert I sang in Mumbai in the morning. And I was completely unaware of their presence. I didn't even know them at the time, except Anish Pradhan I knew. And Anish was sitting right in the front row, and these other three were sitting right at the last row in the back of the hall. And I did sing Jaunpuri at the time, and it is my recollection they must have liked, and Anish Pradhan might have suggested that in the opening scene of the film, let's use this rag. But other than that, I would say generally, as far as Jaunpuri is concerned, it is a rag of Shringar Ras, and the beginning of the film being on classical music, I think it was a very wise choice to put Jaunpuri right in front of the audience or the viewers, because it gives the bandish, for example, Chum Chanana Bichua Baje. It's a romantic bandish. It's a bandish of full of life and full of romance and Shringar Ras. And so that gives a very nice opening to the whole theme of the movie. And so I think, and that's a coincidence. By coincidence, they heard me singing that at a concert, and then it happens to be a rag of romanticism. So it all worked out well, I think.
Yeah.
I think I'll jump to the second part of your question. As rightly Nana said, like the way they started with that performance, and coming to the second part of your question, where you again see me singing the same Jaunpuri phrase at the second scene. The point is, in the first scene you see Nana singing the Jaunpuri at its best and at his best in the concert, and then you see camera moving to me where Sharad is completely in awe of his Guruji, and to set that dynamics, you completely are cut to the next scene where I am trying to do the same thing, learn the same thing, but I'm just singing very like naive phrases of Jaunpuri and just trying to learn it. So that's exactly where you can set immediately the dynamics are set, where first he was in awe of that Jaunpuri, but he's just at the beginning stage where he's trying to learn those phrases, and that's how that connection is set.
Yeah, it gives a very clear contrast, and that probably also helps settle perhaps an audience that is not acclimated to this music form either, and seeing it done in a more technically, sufficient way compared to how a student would then learn it.
Right.
Yeah, it's such an enchanting rag too. So I think at the beginning of the film, it really forces you to be drawn in to the narrative. So, and continuing our exploration of the use of rag in the film, Deepika and Aditya, there's a scene where Sharad is unable to internalize and communicate his ideas in Rag Miyaki Malhar. So I thought this would be a bit of a fun question. So what's a moment in both of your lives where you've experienced a similar conundrum?
Okay, I'll just continue. I think, yeah, this is, I wouldn't say always, but I would still say most of the times, to a lesser degree, of course, there won't be such a bit of confusion, of course, in our lives, but it's always because, like I say, when you are performing, especially classical music in front of audience, there are too many variables which come into the picture, because the pre-composed part of this entire recital is a very short bandish that we learn, and everything is happening at the spur of the moment on that day. So there are too many variables. What are your accompanists on that day? What kind of acoustics or the sound system you are getting? What are the people that you are performing in front of? Are they your friends? Are they from the similar community? Are they completely different picture? uh, and many other things, like who are your accompanists and many other things. So all these variables play different role on your mind, ultimately influencing your performance on that day. So yeah, there are always times when, and also your health or your mindset on that day, so because of these variables, there are situations where you are still trying to cope with that situation at that point, where maybe you prepared a rag or thought process in a particular way, but that somehow is not working at that moment when you are on the stage. And that's many a times it has happened, of course. But like you said, yeah, definitely we cope with that. There's no alternative. You can't give up at that stage like Sharad did, because for him it was like a completely end and deciding point. But yeah, absolutely, there is always a way where you keep focusing and do not give up, and ultimately you find some way at that point. I'll leave it to Nana and Deepika as well.
Yes.
I had rather funnier experience. I haven't actually had this experience in my real life, but I had a dream that I attended one concert as an audience, and when I entered into the hall, everybody was looking at me and very weirdly. And then I saw the brochure, and the announcer announced that after the interview we will be hearing Deepika, and I was completely lost at that moment. But then also I somehow gathered the courage and went on the stage, and I announced some rag. I don't know which rag, and I started with some other rag. I don't know. But I was so scared after 2-3 minutes that I woke up. And I really thank God every day that this has never happened in my life in actual. And I hope that this never happens with any of the artists.
Yeah, thankfully it was just a dream.
Lucky Deepika, I have created blunders in my dreams.
Well, then can they be called dreams if they're filled with blunders? Perhaps they're nightmares, right? But yeah, definitely a funny experience. Now, Arunji, I'd like to go back to you to start with this question. So one rag can take quite a while to explore, as we know, ranging anywhere from 20 to 75 minutes on stage nowadays. What was it like for you to try to give recitals in such a short period of time for the film? And how did you manage to both present the hidden nuances that each scene wanted to portray through the music, as well as then produce something coherent enough to feel like a fuller performance?
Well, I will refer everyone to the old generation 78 RPM discs, small records. And they were typically 3 minutes duration, 3.25 minutes duration. And you can hear some very eminent old masters singing the rag with the bandish, and all elements compressed into 3 minutes. So if they can do it, it's not like something never been done. And secondly, for a film which is based on Hindustani music, but it is not a Hindustani music concert of any artist. So there are limitations on the length of each song, limitations on the patience of an audience to hear through a longer song. Because mind you, all the people who will watch this film or have watched this film are not necessarily music aficionados. They are ordinary people, and they may not be interested in listening to more than 3-4 minutes of a song. So, and thirdly, Anish Pradhan was very, very effective and helpful in guiding each one of us singing our own songs, sitting in front of there behind the cameras and with hand gestures, showing transition from, let's say, the first 1 minute of Alap, then to the Bandish, then the Tan patterns and all of that. I mean, he was kind of gesticulating and guiding us through the short 2-3 minute sequences. So it helped in compressing, let's say, a sense of the rag into a 3-minute or a 2-minute scene. It had to be done because it's a film.
So coming back to the same question on that, when you're doing a shoot for the film, sometimes, as I mentioned, you had to reshoot again. So does that affected on your performance while taking Bandish or Alap or any rag at that moment?
So I would like to say one thing here, even for the audience, you will be surprised to know that none of these music sequences were recorded live when we were performing them in front of the camera. We recorded these first in a studio and then we acted on them, which was a big challenge for all of us because when you are singing a song, you can by heart that particular song and then you can reproduce the same song when you are doing the scene
Yes.
sequence. But what happened was, even though we knew, every time we sing, we tend to get carried away when we are performing classical music, and we sang whatever we wanted on that point in time, for those 3 minutes. But when we were shooting that, we actually had to memorize each and every alap matra to matra, or the tan, what we exactly had done few months ago while we were recording that, and then act and mime to that when we were performing that. And that's why you can see that a lot of effort also has gone to that. So it's very difficult to make sense that, okay, this is not dubbed, and like you said, of course it was challenging to redo those sequences, but as we had already recorded that, so yeah, it wasn't like where we kept on singing all throughout the day through all those retakes and stuff like that.
Right. Also, Aditya, in the movie, you had done a lot of transformations for your role. Like weight gaining is a major factor with the growing age. So, was it more challenging on that part?
Absolutely, yes. So it was like completely arc of a journey, because before I started the film, I was completely of a different lifestyle and I was super overweight to do the role of the young Sharad anyways. So I had to lose first almost 20-23 kgs to be the young 22-year-old Sharad, and that was a big challenging part. But thanks to again Vivek, Chaitanya, because I got a nice trainer and all the right kind of consultants and advisors who helped me through that. And for the second part, I had to put all those 20 kgs back again in a very short period of time, which I think was the most challenging part for me rather than losing them, because putting on so much of weight in such a short amount of time is very brutal in a way. But that was again a very challenging experience. But yeah, like this whole journey, but how it helps, is this transformation is not just to look like that way, but you also start feeling that way when you lose. And it wasn't about like just looking 22 years old, but like the body age actually turned out went to 22 years old when we even tried to do the test and do like. So I started feeling like a 22-year-old when I was that lean and became like the young Sharad. And same thing happened, when we were putting on so much of weight in such a short amount of time. When you try to eat so much of processed food and all that processed amount of calories, what it does to your health also, it actually ages you. And it's not just that you become fat or just gain on the weight to look like 42, but it actually pushes your body age to 42, and that's how you again start feeling that. Uh, and that's how it helps you get in your gait and your hand gestures also. It's not just about acting, but you actually become that person. And that's why I keep calling myself, I'm the forced method actor, because I'm not an actor per se, but it was more like a forced method acting technique where you actually become that person in both the parts of the film.
Yeah, that looked really great on screen.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting how, you said that physical change really helped you internalize being in that state of mind a lot better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Sharad's father once told him that everything is part of the performance, alluding that both things on and off the stage, even how an artist presents themselves publicly, is part of a performance. As it is a world of music that is still heavily concerned with dogmatic practices, what are the public pressures that you have felt over the years budding into your musical careers?
Shall I take this one?
Yeah, please.
You referred to the importance of appearance apart from your own singing capabilities when you are performing on a stage. See, music is a performing art as compared with non-performing arts, and there are other performing arts like dance or drama. And it is the importance of the appearance of the artist in addition to his or her talents in performing that art. The importance of this has been known since ancient times, particularly the famous treatise called Natya Shastra, written by our old sage Bharata Muni. The title itself is Natya Shastra, but in the treatise, he discusses not just Natya as a drama, but also other forms of performing art like music or dance. And they are all form of a natya, according to him. And because they are all form of a natya, how you look while you perform and how you captivate the eyes of the audience, apart from their ears, he says, is equally important. My own Guru Kishori Tai was extremely particular about this point, and she would insist on her disciples, you have to look nice, not just sing nice. And she herself was always immaculately dressed with just the right kind of makeup and everything else. So there is the importance of what in the film Sharad's father says, that appearance is also equally important. So this is one little side on this is it's a real example of what happened earlier, I think a couple of years ago. A famous music organizer who organizes music festivals around the country, once was asked why a certain artist, ABC, I won't name him now, is not ever finding a place in any of the festivals EU sponsor. And his answer was, oh, he's a very good singer, no doubt. But he comes through as a very shabbily dressed, shabby looking person on the stage. And I was kind of alarmed when I heard that answer from him, but he said it very casually. But it shows not just the audiences, but also the producers of concerts, festivals are selective, not just because a person is extremely talented, but also how he would come through on the stage, because mind you, their eyes are also on the number of people who would attend and who would buy the tickets. So the whole thing is rather intertwined, and the importance of looking presentable or attractive on the stage, apart from presenting your art nicely. These are examples of it.
Yeah. Aditya, do you have anything you'd like to add on this?
No, I think Nana was hands-on completely on that, and I agree to everything that he said. And like I was talking about the acting segment of that, same thing applies to your when you are dressed properly into that. It's more about being disciplined to your art as well, and feeling that if you are dressing very casually, that comes out as a matter of fact in front of your audience that okay, you are also not that serious about this entire thing, and that's how it is looked by the audience and the organizers of the concerts as well. So yeah, I completely agree to what he said.
And we find that this film is not only about a vocalist achieving, or it's not about a vocalist achieving greatness, but it's more about a vocalist maneuvering through his mediocrity, as well as that of his socio-cultural environment. Nowadays, many people note that mediocrity, the flashy tans, the lack of artistry, or what we see in the film, the very exuberant tabla solo that happens in the middle of Badhat, has received more attention and platforms versus actual excellence and artistry. So is this something that you believe as current upholders of the Khayal tradition as being true? And then how do we define mediocrity versus artistic excellence?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, Nana, please. It's a difficult question.
Well, the word mediocrity, I think, is slightly misconceived here. I would say that the depth and serenity of one's performing level or one's preparedness, let's say in the field of vocal music, often drives how you perform on the stage. Now, there are instances of many artists who have failed to reach the level of internal depth and expression of their emotions and talent into their vocal performance to an extent where some of the masters might have done that in the past. So how do you fill the void that you are not really up to that high level of performance? Well, then you resort to what are called these, I call them gimmickry. I don't call it mediocrity, I call it gimmickry, such as super fast dance or singing super fast sargams, and a wide abundance of what we call alankars, like khatkas, murkis, harkats, spread and sprinkled in the to an excessive level into your vocal performance. Now, these are some of the gimmicks that are resorted to, and that is often a measure of the lack of the depth and the true sensitivity to the melody that you are presenting to the audience. So one gets forced into this, and let's not forget that compared with one generation ago, compared with 50 years ago, it's not just the artists who might resort to this either mediocrity or you might say gimmickry as a technique to present, but the audience itself, in my own humble opinion, has increasingly become mediocre compared with the audiences of the past. I know for a fact that even big masters like Kesarbai Kerkar or Bhimsen Joshi would be rather nervous in singing in front of just a small 100 people audience 50 years ago, because that 100 people audience was such a connoisseur audience, even though not themselves singers. They were thoroughly ingrained into high class of talent, and so it was a challenge. And there, this gimmickry was often missing. You never heard that kind of gimmickry as you get to hear today, and that's one of the reasons is not just the shortfall or shortness of talent in the artist himself or herself, but also the mediocrity of the audience and the audience's willingness to accept the gimmickry as a measure of accomplishment.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, that kind of cycle that gets set up between the audience feeding the performer and then it gets fed back to the audience, and then that keeps informing this rise of gimmickry that we see. Deepika, your thoughts?
I think in every generation there are artists having deepest knowledge of their subject, maybe any art, maybe dance, maybe music, any art. And also they have such a command over their medium, such a jaw-dropping command over their medium. Some of them try and succeed in showcasing both of it. Some of them choose to show either of it, and some of them have either of it. And I think every artist, strives to be good artist. Nobody practices to be a bad artist. It's just that good and bad are relative terms. That something which I feel is good should not be as good as for you. And I also think that even if somebody is not as good as in their they are not in the command of their medium, still they are respected in every time, each times. Like if somebody is not as much as in command of their medium, but they are highly knowledgeable, then also the students, as we are also the students, and we also go and learn and listen to them, just for the sake of listening and learning from them. So I think this whole idea is a relative term. And even though we agree that many of the artists, some of the artists are having the bigger platforms than actually what they deserve, but I think they must have some quality that puts them there, and they must have something which audience likes. And that is how I feel, that everybody has something. It's not like somebody is gaining something out of nowhere. He or she must have something, but it is just their choice what and exactly how much to showcase. They might have the excellence, but they might think that, okay, this is the kind of audience I'm performing in front of, and I should. And also I would like to say that just singing flashy and fast dance also requires a lot of effort. It is not as easy as we think. So I'm not being on any of the side, but I think both is equally harder.
No, that's a good point, and especially in pointing out, because it's an art form, that there is a certain level of subjectivity, in terms of what we like. And this is an art form that's been brought out from the temples and the courts now to the, everyday people. So that subjectivity has even increased because the scope of what that audience is has also increased. Now, Aditya, I'd love for you to start off this question. So it's difficult not to be jealous of your peers in such a competitive niche music world that doesn't have a very clear path forward for most emerging artists. An artist can easily lose themselves in trying to find their footing, and once finding it, can become egocentric and politically motivated even to uphold themselves. How can we shift into creating a clearer and healthier professional space for emerging artists that steers away from personally driven agendas and music politics?
Wow, that's a brilliant question, I think. And I'll try my best to answer that. Nana, please feel free to chip in case if you think that I'm not doing a good job here. I think it's a brilliant question. And what stems from this whole thing, is because the way the upbringing of the classical music, when he is learning, any disciple is learning, is how the way he surrenders to his guru or his artist, he becomes of one opinion where he's only following that path for a very long time. Okay, and after only a point in time where he masters that particular form, then he starts looking at other forms at that where he's trying to find his own way. And what happens in this quest is he becomes too focused on a particular art form or the way of doing that particular, you can say it gharana or a style or whatever you want to call it, that after one point he starts thinking that, okay, this is the only way. And the moment you start thinking that this is the only way to a particular destination, it's the biggest trap there. And that's the root cause of all the problems that are happening. It's more of understanding that, okay, all there are different ways that lead to that same destination, and we need to respect that. We need to also acknowledge that it's not just one way of singing a particular rag that can always be hold true or right in that way. Like if you change the gharana, the way Kirana Garana looks at a particular rag for say Marwa is completely different when you look at Marwa sung by a Gwalior artist or maybe another completely different Garana. And if you're open to these kind of ideas and respect that diversity of ideas and thought process in the same field of music, then this egocentric or all these jealousy form would, I think, drop down. But if you cling on to your ideas, or if you keep on like this is the tradition that I follow and that is the only correct thing or way to go about it, then I think it will stay, all these things will stem out from this particular idea. But I think I will open to Nana also. Please shower some light on this.
Well, there are ample examples of very prominent celebrity status artists of the last generation who have had 2 or 3 gurus of different gharanas. And I can give you examples like Keshwarbai Kirkar, who had for her main guru prominently, and the whole world knows it, was Aladia Khan Sahab. But she also had taken training under Wazebua, and she of Gwalior Gharana, and she also had training under Ustad Abdul Karim Khan Sahab, Kirana Gharana. So it is not as if you are excluded or you should not absorb vocal music or instrumental for that matter from different gharanas. What I find a little bit disturbing is that there is sometimes, particularly in the modern day students of music, tendency to do this learning process concurrently from 2 or 3 different gurus of different gharanas. Now that is something I would think is a cause of conflict, cause of confusion in their own minds as they develop through their learning process. None of that, the past examples I know are of that nature. They would stay with a guru for 10, 15 years, then go to another guru for another 10 years, and maybe a third one for 5 or 7 years, but never concurrently to 2 or 3 different gurus. So I think this is something worth thinking about. But I'm all for having not only inter-gharana learning process, but also intra-gharana. Don't forget that even in a given gharana, there are 2 or 3 or 4 streams of that gharana, which have slight differences in their own presentation styles and their own bandishes, their own styles. Therefore, whether it's intra-gharana mixing or inter-gharana mixing of styles and singing capability, that should be welcomed. I think that produces more variety and more richness to your own music level of presentation. But then it should be done in a segregated manner, not concurrently. This is my view.
No, some really interesting points. And as Mai in the film says, and it's commonly known for most practitioners, that this music is Margiya Sangeet, right? It's the music of the eternal quest. So as Aditya and Arunji have both mentioned, that there are multiple paths to achieving that quest. And there's so much to learn. You can't stop at one path and think you know everything, right? So Deepika, we can start with you for this question. Were there any points in the project that you felt conflicted with your character or with the narrative?
No, never. Because that is what we do every day. Like take talim, do riyaz, and that is the whole thing we have been doing since so many years. So I think that was the part which made us comfortable to be in the character. So I don't think that I personally, that is my opinion.
And maybe that's why it really shined through in the film, I think, that you all seem to be very comfortable in your roles. And kudos, I think, to Chaitanya ji for actually including practitioners of the craft, in the film instead of actors. Aditya?
Yeah, I will have a different say on this because I think my journey or my thought process was completely different from Sharad. And I don't think like him. I have not spent my life like him. I don't believe in the thoughts that he believed. So it was a completely, even though like I could relate to what he says because I'm from the same genre of music and have spent a lot of time, learning this craft. So I could understand what he's going through. But like I've done all the things in my life. Like I've done my college festivals, bands, then job, and now films, everything for that matter. So I'm completely different from the way that character was thinking. So I had a lot of conversations and discussions with Chaitanya, and he helped me to actually start believing. That's what that whole method acting was part of. Also, when you are not just physical transformation but also an internal transformation, where you actually need to connect with that character emotionally, because otherwise if you don't believe in those thoughts, it's very difficult to fake those emotions on the screen as well, and audience can make out that difference. And that's what happened. Because of these discussions, I actually went into the shoes of that character, where I at one point I started believing those thoughts, and that's why you can see that on the screen as well. And after the shoot was over, it took me another like 3-4 months to like make myself realize that okay, this is something, I'm not this person, I'm a completely different person, and to come out of that this thing. But yeah, absolutely, because of how Chaitanya was mentoring us and the discussions that I kept on having with him, that played a vital role, for me to stay in that character and understand what he's going through so that it's depicted in the correct form on the screen.
Just continuing with the same question, like now the movie has been released and it's so do you feel like I could have done something different, I can do better?
I don't think like I could have done anything wrong or better, but I would certainly say, because there are a lot of instructions or points that Chaitanya kept giving me on the sets, and it's a very different, a very, very weird experience to watch you on the screen along with people sitting beside you. And that's the
Yeah.
point where you start realizing, because see, when you guys watch the film, it's a completely different experience for you to watch the story as such. But when I'm watching the film, and I think Nana and Deepika will agree with me, for us it's a different experience, because for every scene we go back to the day of the shoot, where we start recollecting all the memories and the instructions that Chaitanya was giving us at that point. And for us, we kept I had moments where I could say like, oh, he had told me to not do this, but I still did that. And it's okay, but yeah, it could have been better if I had not done that. He was right, and stuff like that. So yeah, I wouldn't say like completely different, because the whole thing, Chaitanya crafted us into being these actors that people are loving. So I wouldn't say like I could have done this better or not better, but yeah, these are the cases I keep feeling, and I keep recollecting like, okay, this could have been not done, which he told me not to, but I could still did that. So,
What about you, Deepika?
As an actor, I actually don't have anything to compare to. So I completely believed in Chaitanya. If he says okay, it is okay, then it is okay. If he says we have to do it again, then we would do it again. And that is how it is for the acting matter. And as a musician, I think there is always scope for development and improvement.
Yeah, there is always scope for improvement.
And I just want to give a quick reminder to our audience. We're nearing the end of the moderated discussion. We have a few questions left. So just a reminder, start sending your questions in, and we will start asking them soon. To what degree, let me preface this a bit. So in the film, we see Sharad listening to these tapes of Mai, his grand guru, in the film. And in a lot of these tapes, she talks about the quality of esotericism and religion and spirituality in the music. So to what degree should esotericism and spirituality play a role in Hindustani music? And at what point does it become too much or overbearing?
I think I'll go first and then leave it to Nana as well. I would like him to speak also his thoughts on this. But like you, and excuse me if I take a little bit longer for this question because it's a layered question what you're asking. But right, like you pointed out in your previous questions, like where Mai talks about this being Margiya Sangeet, it actually is, if you go back to Sangeet Ratnakar and the oldest scriptures, they do talk about this music as the classical music, or Shastriya Sangeet is what we call it now, but it is typically a Margiya Sangeet which was meant for internal quest, what we call Atma Ranjan. And there was another form of music what was called Deshi Sangeet, which had a song element, that Geet element which all other forms have, and that was meant for entertainment. So, and as we have evolved over a period of time, we are trying to entertain people with an art form which was never meant for entertainment. So we are always going to be struggling with that. But like I said, with the times are changing and evolving, even the art form has evolved. So the classical music that you heard like 60 or 100 years back also has evolved to a very large extent, because now there are so many other forms gradually increasing and becoming popular, which the classical music artists need to also be aware and evolve themselves to that art also. So when you talk about that, every art form has evolved and needs to evolve. I can't be performing exactly the same way how the classical music recitals were 100 years back, or let's say 50 years back. But at the same time, it's a very thin line and a challenge for every classical artist, where it's a trade-off, like where you want to stay classicist, at the same time also make your art aesthetic enough for everyone to like it, and not just the connoisseurs who are have been listening to the old masters at the same time. And that's a very thin line, because if you just cross that line, your music starts becoming superficial enough and you are in the danger zone again. But if you only try to be classicist, there's a risk that your music is not aesthetic enough for a wider audience per se. And that is the point where every artist has to make his own choice and a conscious be aware about this, and not just keep on divinizing this art form, or the things that have been said. It's more about the relevance, like you try to apply them in the best way possible in the current times and make the best of it. These are just my thoughts on the take.
Arunji, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just have one point added here. The whole concept of spirituality, or esotericism, as you called it, is this particular today's generation has lost its luster from, let's say, 1 or 2 generations ago. Just the way Guru Shishya Parampara, which is one of the themes sort of shown in this film, and its struggle in keeping up with the socio-economic pressures of life today. There was a time in older generations where, first of all, there was far less competition between potentially or promising singers coming out. There was a more prominent system of the Guru and the Shishyas staying together, doing the true elements of Guru Shishya Parampara. And therefore, to a level that the esotericism that you mentioned, or even the importance of spirituality in one's own sadhana practice, was a much more lively phenomenon when there were very few disciples doing a Guru Shishya Parampara truly at a Guru's place. Now, today's world, under the present socio-economic factors, as Aditya has mentioned, one is forced to dabble into 2, 3, 4 different genres of music. You can't remain a completely 100% pure classicist and survive well until you reach the very top of the ladder. And because of that, and because the Guru Shishya Parampara in its old form is vanishing fast. Well, there are elements of that still seen, but far and few, more exceptions than rule. And the old teaching, do your sa every day, just stay on the sa for 2 hours. All right, there was a time when such teaching was practicable, because you lived with the Guru 12, 15 hours a day. That was the only thing you were doing. So singing sa for 2 hours, day after day after day, was something that generation of that with Guru Shishya Parampara could do. Today, if you say that is what is expected and that is where you will take. So in a way, this is a little conflict with the teachings of Mai that you hear in the film. Now, film is a film, and there is a certain music and its social repercussions are thrown as a let's say as a theme of the film. But truly speaking, if you say that Mai's teachings in every single word of her are to be brought into practice to achieve the excellence of classical music as a performing artist, in today's socio-economic pressure, it is just a pipe dream. It will not happen. But that's the way society is changing. That's the way life is changing, and the whole pressure for economic survival is forcing people not to really be so esoteric about this thing. And apart from spirituality, to some extent, there are still elements that you have to have that focus on the Shruti elements of singing the sur, singing where the true feel of a rag is reflected by what application and what deep thought into, but all of that is, you can call it as a part of spirituality, but it is not the kind of spirituality you might have seen in the past. I don't think today there is any much place left for that.
No, some really interesting points. I think the core of all of this is that element of sadhana in practice, which, even though is not the same as the past, is still present in some shape or form and heavily informs a current music students or even performers or any practitioners' current practice. So I think this is a good place for us to conclude with one more question. As with any film, there's always some negative reception that ends up coming out. And with this film, a lot of it has been from, let's say, other members of the Hindustani community, either as musicians or hardcore aficionados, who perhaps feel that this film has crossed some lines. Why do you think that's so, and what would your message be to them?
I'll take this. It's interesting, and I'm glad you brought this question. To give you a small background about this is, if you talk about Marathi or Hindi audience of film, the way for them to look at any particular cinema is they are just trying to look for two things. Either one thing is something great or fantasy is happening at the end of the film, or if it's not happening, then there is some message that's being said in the film, but if you look at the international language of cinema or filmmaking, cinema is more of a medium to just portray the kind of truth that is existent in this world in its true form. And that's what I think Marathi or Hindi audience has not been very exposed to that kind of filmmaking. So what happens is, when people from the same genre, like the classical music field, are looking at this film, either they were thinking that, okay, something great will happen at the end of this, or something very pure or very fancy thing will come out of this, or either it's trying to tell a message. But I think this film is not trying to give any message. It's just portraying the harsh realities in the most candid and real way as possible, and it's leaving up to you to come up with your own interpretations. And of course, when it's this kind of a like a unsettling kind of a film at the end, people are bound to have their own interpretations out of that, and I respect that also. It's always there are different perspectives to look at the film, and it's interesting to know, because if you talk about these controversial different opinions of the people, it's hardly, I would say, like 5 to 6%, but the rest of the world has been celebrating this subject, and the way mediocrity has been finally talked about, because otherwise films are just talking either about super failures or super successes, and that's not how life is. It's more than 90% of the times you see these things happening. I can name so many people who have spent a lot of time religiously on this particular subject, but ultimately resorted to some other allied forms, to for their survival, and that doesn't necessarily make them failure. Just because they are not performing enough, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are just mediocre and they are failures in their life. It's more about finding your own peace with whatever you feel like, and ultimately resorting to something that makes you happy and content. And that's why you see Sharad finally smiling in the whole film in the third part. So another perspective of looking at is, he finally made peace with whatever shortcomings he thought he had, and then finally he made peace with that and settled in his life and doing something which is still resonating with his gharana and the music that he came from. But he's not just performing, he's just trying to spread that music to the audience. So yeah, it's about more about looking at that film, and it just showing all the realities in its true sense. And maybe some of the times it's not very easy to accept, to see those realities in front of you on the screen.
So Aditya, on the same lines, how was the experience at Venice?
Oh wow! So I just have two words: overwhelming and surreal. Because like I said in all other interviews also, like when we were doing this film, and I think Deepika and Arunji will agree with me, we were happy to do this film because we are doing something completely different. We're learning completely different, but at the same time, this is because this is associated with the very subject that we have spent our lives on, and we were satisfied and happy with that itself. So even after the whole shooting journey, we were happy with whatever we had done with the film, because everyone gave their heart and soul to the film. But when I got a call from Chaitanya and he told me about this, I still took a lot of time to process that, like how big this was, that Venice Film Festival and all other festivals. It actually, I could understand it when I was on the red carpet and in that Sala Grande auditorium and watching the film with all the other audience in that auditorium. That's the time when it actually struck me, like how big this is. And it was completely overwhelming and surreal to be there in the midst of pandemic as well. We had to go through a lot of permissions and authorities to be there, but it was very overwhelming. And the kind of response we got there was also very overwhelming for us, because for a Marathi film and also a film based on classical music, we got a long standing ovation and a clap of almost for a minute after the film. And the amount of love and respect and response that film was getting all through Venice, it was amazing to see. So it was very satisfying and overwhelming at the same time.
Right.
Wonderful. So that brings us to the end of our moderated questions. So we'll now move to audience questions. I just want to remind the audience members you can still keep your questions coming in. Also, for those of you tuning in on Facebook or YouTube, we also have a volunteer who is going to be checking questions there and submitting them to us. So please share your thoughts. So the first question comes from A.K. Suresh. So in relation to spirituality or practicing music for one's own self-fulfillment versus performing to audiences in Indian classical music, this does not seem to be a new thing. We have the distinction between Swami Haridas, the guru of Miya Tansen, and Miya Tansen himself. The conflict has always been there. It was probably worse in ancient times when the opinion of one person, the monarch, mattered most. Never mind how the rest of the world thought about it. Any comments or thoughts about this?
I will just say shortly on this, like rightly said by him, it's a relative thing. But at the same time, like I said, it's more about the objective, what you want to achieve from that recital or performance or that art. If your objective is more about the internal quest, accordingly your art will shape into that form. But if you are trying to entertain people, or the king in case of Miya Tansen, or the audience in case of the performing artist of this generation, your art form will automatically shape into all those relevant elements and according to the objective that you're trying to achieve from that performance.
Anyone else have any thoughts they wanted to add on this? No? All right. Saurabh, did you want to ask the next one?
Yeah. So the next question is from Aman Parmar. Says, love the film. Question to Arun sir. Is there any current living artist who you think will go down in history as one of the greatest musicians, such as Pandit Bhimsen Joshi or Ravi Shankar? And how do you think the general audience who barely gives classical music any chance can be made more aware of spiritual power and greatness of classical music?
It's very hard for me to take names. There are many prominent musicians today, vocalists today, who are performing in an incredible manner. And there could be maybe a dozen or so who might be in the list of becoming one of the Bhimsen Joshi or Kishori Amonkar level artists at the peak of their careers. So I can only say that the picture is very hopeful for Indian classical vocal music, and there are many good artists who will one day reach that level. Many candidates, shall I say, not all of them will reach that level, but there are very many candidates who show the potential today of being there.
And do you think what can be made aware of spiritual power and greatness of classical music to the younger general audience?
Well, I think I sort of said something on the esotericism and the spirituality in my earlier answer. So I will be repeating myself if I said that. But I think that apart from playing to the gallery, or apart from dabbling into many quote unquote popular ways of performing your music, do spend some time in the thought process, in the chintan process of when you do your riyaz, at least some time of it, not 2 hours on a sa, but something like that, but deeply thinking about the application of notes, where the shrutis are, in what way a certain rag becomes more effective if you stay at the right shruti of that rag. And some of this has to come from your own guru. And that's all I can say. And that should be a one level up from singing a mediocre type of classical performance.
This question also is for Arunji, comes from David Tresoff. Did you have any previous acting experience before coming onto this role?
None whatsoever. The very first one, so that's the short answer.
Do you see yourself doing any more in the future?
Not in the immediate future. I'm not sure I will succumb to the pressure again, but who knows? Future will tell.
How about for you, Aditya and Deepika? Aditya, I know you have some previous acting experience. I was reading your website. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that as well?
No, so that was very brief, at the, I just started with that and the film came up, and so I had to stop doing that, thankfully, because so that I could focus more on that. And with regards to the future, I honestly don't know, because I'll always stay a musician first, but I had a wonderful time acting. So if anything, opportunities come up which resonate to, my journey that I want to, that I am on, then I would surely love to explore those opportunities.
Deepika?
Yes, definitely. I don't have any past experience before the film, but if anything that comes up which makes me comfortable, which I'm uncomfortable, and which Aditya said resonates with my thought process, and I enjoy doing, if anything comes up, I might explore.
So the next question is from Rohan Khadilkar. He says, we love the voice over by Sumitra Bhave, who is a legend in Marathi cinema. Unfortunately, she just passed away. But what Sumitra Bhave, the first preference of voicing experts for my lecture? Do you have any interactions with Sumitra Bhave as well?
I don't think we could have interactions with her, because since she was not part of the shooting, she had recorded all those voiceovers earlier, before we began the shoot. And that helped me a lot, because before even we began the shoot, I kept listening to those, like Sharad was, to get into that character. But I think Chaitanya would be the right person to answer that question. But what I know is he always had her voice, because Chaitanya thinks that she has the most cinematic voice, she can capture you completely with that voice. So she might have been his first choice, but I'm not sure. So I think Chaitanya would be the right person to answer that question.
Right.
The next question comes from Rasika. So the Indian talent show which the movie had featured, and in it was another classical singer who Sharad watches. What was the intention of that or those scenes, and what do classical singers think of these competitions? To continue the legacy, would it be important for classical singing to become more mainstream?
So the main object, there was no particular objective, I would say, because that scene actually again adds to the confusion or the conundrum that is being created in minds of Sharad, because at the same time he is following a very sacred path which Mai keeps talking about. That's his whole journey about. He's seeing his Guruji also following almost the same path that Mai is talking, so everything is going in line, but it's not leading anywhere in the near future. But at the same time, he puts on the TV, he sees that someone from a village just came up, she sang something nice, and in just few episodes you can just see her transformation getting changed into someone very famous and which is celebrated all over the country or the world. And that is what is actually bringing all that confusion and the internal insecurity, the what I would say is the jealousy, all that stuff together. It's not one feeling that he's going through, it's a complex and a layered thing where he's at the same time he starts questioning, like, is this bad or is this really true, or am I on the right path? Has it been that I've been on the wrong path following something? Because at the same time you see that something completely opposite to what his thought process or beliefs had been being celebrated worldwide and getting all the recognition and success. But even if he has spent all his life on the same path that he has been listening and Mai or his Guruji has following, it's not leading him to anywhere. So there is no particular message out of that, but it's just to show, and that's what actually you see in these reality shows as well, right? I don't want to comment about what we think specifically on these reality shows, because it's again a very personal, it would be a personal opinion. But I actually want to tell all these audiences, it's not about comparing, because you cannot compare classical music journey with a reality show, because when you talk about these reality shows, and I have seen them very closely, so I can say this very responsibly, is reality shows are completely not about music. They are more about entertainment and creating the stories that you would like to see on the camera. So yeah, the music is actually not the center point of any of these musical reality shows. It's more about, they will just try to show you some kind of a very completely different story from reality, just so that you stick to your screen, and they are trying to entertain you. That's the only element that comes out from that.
Saurabh?
Yeah. So the next question is from Vish, particularly for Arunji. Did the movie cause you to reflect on your own relationship with your gurus and disciples?
Well, to some extent, yes. The film, as it depicts the relationship between the Guruji and Sharad, did take me many years ago to my own life, when I was a disciple first as a high school boy with Ustad Majid Khan Sahab, and later with Gana Saraswati, Kishori Amonkar, and to a small extent also from Gana Tapaswini Mogubai Kurdikar. I have seen glimpses of what my teachings are in this film. I've seen those glimpses come through both from our real Mai, that is Gana Tapaswini Mogubai. We used to call her Mai also. And in fact, I found that there was a striking resemblance between the voiceover character in the film with the real life Mai that we all knew, and also to an extent with my own Guru Kishori Amonkar. There is a resemblance of the type of thinking that Mai is propagating in the film. And that is the way classical music, the way the sadhana should be, and the state of achieving real serenity and the real depth of classical music, as compared with going for the cheaper varieties or genres of music which will give you name and fame. So as far as my own experience, yes, I have seen that. But on the other hand, I will also at the same time, in the same breath, say that the total devotion and the total surrender that has been talked about in Mai's teachings here, And also to some extent that I could see in being practiced by Kishori Tai herself to her own gurus, of which Mai was one of them. Our real Mai was one of them, and Kishori Tai had other gurus also. So that level of devotion and surrender, I myself never did practice in my life, could not practice in my life because I was engaged into other academic and professional activities at the same time. And as I said before, the true Guru Shishya Parampara was not very alive in the later generations. So I can only say that yes, I have observed this while being a disciple, but I am regretfully could not myself practice it to the full extent of the devotion and surrender that the film talks about.
Thank you.
So I thought this was a kind of an interesting question. So it comes from Leslie Schneider. So she says, thank you for the excellent program. Would you feel that the shift in the quality of this music and the subsequent audience response is mostly the result of the rag itself, no longer the central performer on stage? It seems now to be more about the individual personality and, again, subjective, approach of the central performer. And perhaps this is due to the lack of an understanding of the rag and the scope or standards of excellence within the wider community. Do you sense that how well an artist creates and moves within the rag is no longer the main focus of rag performances anymore? That was what the film reflected to me, and why there is a particular difficulty in moving ahead.
Arunji, can I go first?
It's a very long, convoluted question, and I'm not sure I'm able to grasp the question fully. But I think it is talking about the content of a rag as compared with the performance of the rag. If I'm really getting that question right, I'm not sure I am, but I'll attempt anyway. The film is not so much about the exact content of a rag that is being played or sung, whether it's Jaunpuri or Sampurna Malkaus or Hamir or Vasant Kedar. The particular content of the rag itself, the structure of the rag itself, is not at all of any importance to the content of the film. The way the artist, whether it's the Guruji or Sharad, are performing their pieces. In 3 minutes, you are trying to compress that rag. It hardly ever gives the chance for you to completely elaborate the structure of the rag. But his or her, the disciples or the Guruji's body language, their gestures, their interaction with each other on the stage, that's something, is a portrayal of how a real life concert setting might be, or a real life teaching and learning process is. So look at it as a portrayal of the reality of teaching and learning and the reality of performing, rather than what rag it is being sung or what rag structure do you hear in that rag.
If I get her question right, it was more about what is currently happening, and I really like the question that was asked, where and I completely resonate to what she's talking about, where the form is actually taking the part and it is becoming more individualistic. Of course, it is an individual form of art, I would say, because everything is improvised by that individual. It's your thought process about that rag. But this was the case when I look back at the old artists, where rather than portraying themselves in the art, they actually surrendered to the rag or a melody as an artist. And finally, the rag was always the center point of that performance. But because of all the other things, like the focuses have changed, it's more about you coming into the picture, like you becoming famous and you becoming more recognized. All the other techniques maybe, or different forms of either a flashy tan or maybe a complex laikari or any other form. You try to mold every rag into you as an individual and perform that, and that is what has changed. uh, it's very difficult, and it would be wrong to say that that is right or wrong, because again this art is very subjective. But it's a very nice observation and a very true one, where this is actually happening. And it's very evident, where rather than giving the entire importance to the rag and you molding into that rag for that performance, it's always the other way around, that the rag is being molded into what you have learned or your style, and that's the only way of presenting that. But yeah, I can't say about the future, as he pointed out, but yeah, that's actually the direction where everything, the things are moving. And it will be great if people are aware of that and still try to look back at the old masters, how they practice the art, and take some inspiration out of that.
Deepika, do you have any thoughts on this question?
I think Aditya has covered almost all of the points, but I think audience as well as the artists should also consider that, as Mai said, that there are 200 people in the hall and you cannot satisfy everyone. So if the artist tries to satisfy himself, if he tries to be happy with his music, and if he tries to be at a peace, and if he is faithful to his teachings and his riyas, then I think most of the people in the hall would be happier. So that audience should also learn, and audience should also try to be more into the music. And earlier, as we were discussing, I think Saurabh ji asked the question to Arun ji. I think this can start we can start this with teaching the music in schools, at least for 4 to 5 years maybe, because children are not even exposed to the classical music. If we try to educate the entire generation, new generation which is coming, which is going to come in the future for our concerts, then we might succeed somewhere to resolve this kind of problems. They at least should have some knowledge in music, because they are not exposed, they don't know what is classical music. But if we try to educate them to some level, at least what is rag, what is saregama, they don't even know that. So if they also try to educate themselves and we also try to be true to our art, I think this problem can be solved to some extent.
And yeah, that was what you brought up about, your own music should please you. You should feel like it is your own. You can call it your own. I think that relates to what Aditya had mentioned before about the music being Atma Ranjan. If it doesn't please your own Atma, then what's the point of going on that quest of Margiya Sangeet, right? And I think perhaps maybe that's what Sharad realized, right, at the end of the film. So I really would like to thank all of the panelists today, Arunji, Aditya, and Deepika, first for taking the time out. I know the timeline was a bit short for getting this event put together, and really from the bottom of our hearts, we really thank you all for taking this time, committing to the program, and for sharing your thoughts so openly and candidly with us today, for us to have this kind of discussion. And I, of course, would like to thank the participants as well. You have fed this discussion to become what it is as well, and you have brought in some really valuable insights, I think, that we can all take after today and continue to think about and discuss moving forward. I also have a few other people I would like to thank. Saurabh Chate, right when the film came out, we were in conversation with one another. We wanted to do something in our, small area here in Vancouver for the film. And originally we wanted to see if we could host a filming, but it didn't work out. So I'm really glad that we could partner, Saurabh, and thank you so much for, maneuvering around all of this with me. And I'd also like to thank my team over at ICMSV, our board members and volunteers. Many of them are here in the audience today. So if you are, just do your little raise hand feature so people can know who you are and we can all clap for you. Thank you all so much for all the work that you have done. We wouldn't be running without you at all. I also would like to thank my friend Sayali, who set up this Zoom webinar for us because she gets it for free, so we're saving some money. And she's tuning in from the East Coast, so it's quite late for her now. But thankfully, you know, she always has my back. So a big thank you to Sayali for setting all this up. Now, if you're like me, I still have a bunch of questions I want to ask, but we're out of time. So if you would like to continue exploring this film and having conversations about it, Aditya has a concert coming up tomorrow, which is at 6 p.m. PST, I believe. And it's going to be followed by a live interactive session with him. Sorry about that. And it's hosted by Cadence Entertainment. So you can visit teamcadenceentertainment.com to get your tickets, and that way you can continue where we are leaving off today. Please do continue to support ICMSV, Avishkar Arts, and all the panelists you see here today. You can find us all on social media in different forms and YouTube. And in terms of the organizations, we also have mailing lists available. So just Google our names on the web. You can find us, get engaged with us for the future. And if you'd like to support today's program, you can visit icmsv.org to donate towards sustaining our work. We have a lot more exciting programming coming up this year for you, and we'd love to see you all there. Before we conclude, any final remarks by anyone here?
No, I just really want to thank you, Akhil and Saurabh, for articulating this and facilitating this so well and smoothly. And thank you for guiding us through all these questions. And it was pleasure being here answering all the questions. So thank you for having me. Yes, and also sharing this panel with Nana, Arunji, and Deepika.
No, thank you. It's our absolute pleasure.
I would like to thank both of you, Akhilji and Saurabhji, for organizing this meet. And thank you so much for having us. We really had a great time. And we connected after a long time, because we shot in 2018 and 19. And then we are connecting right now. So like it is going down the memory lane for us.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. By the way, no need to call me Akhilji. Just Akhil is more than fine. Thank you.
I would add my own words of thanks for the efforts two of you have made, and generally the whole show was very nicely done. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming and taking the time out. Again, please do stay engaged with us and, continue to discuss in your homes, with your friends, with other peers. Let's keep these conversations going. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Take care.